Good morning, fellow gardeners. We're here this morning in one of our little high tunnels that we grow tomato plants in. You can see the tomatoes here growing in the wicking tubs with a cloth over the top of it. Has a drip tape down underneath the cloth under there that waters them. So that way we don't use the white pipe in here, even though I preached to you to use the white pipe to put the water in. We're not using it here because we're growing them in long rows with a drip tape on them, with a cloth over it to keep the weeds out. And so this is what we're doing in here. But we want to talk about this high tunnel. What's the difference between a high tunnel and a greenhouse? Well, a greenhouse and a high tunnel, they both have doors in them. They both have plastic or some kind of covering over them. The main difference between a high tunnel and a greenhouse, you build it, seal it up as tight as you can, put you a heater in there, and you're going to grow these tender plants like tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, eggplant, green beans, stuff like that. But you have to run some kind of fossil fuel through it, or some kind of wood heat, or either get some geotherm into this to keep from, because those tomato plants have to be kept on up there in the 70s, low 70s, upper 60s somewhere to produce those tomatoes. So you're going to have to use some kind of heat. Well, in a high tunnel, all we're using that for is a extender for our tomatoes. We can come back up and plant about a month earlier, and then in the fall we can go a month or a month and a half later in the fall growing our food, whether it's tomatoes or peppers or eggplants, squash, cucumbers, and on and on. But anyway, so we're not going to heat this high tunnel, because when we put a heater in here, then it's a greenhouse. So what we do, we put the bows up every 4 feet on these houses. Some people go 5 feet, some people even go 6. And in these high winds, though, we think 4 is about the wide as you can go and hold up against these 80-mile-an-hour winds that we have out of the west. This is west for us right now. This is west. This would be south, north behind me, east over this left-hand side here. But anyway, we put a plastic over it, over the frame, and you can see there's not any purlins in here. We usually put one purlin down in the middle, but we run this one up like this for an experiment to see if it would hold up with just the plastic being the strength of this house. And this house has been sitting here now for 7 years, no problem. We've had lots of high wind on it. We do have corner braces on the 4 corners, which you can see the slanted brace that's on the corners to help brace the ends up. And then we put a wiggle wire track over the top of the bow on each end. Just up on the top of the bow, we put a wiggle wire track which is going to hold the plastic. We do that just on each bow on the end, not on the middle. All these middle bows, they have nothing on them. They're just a smooth bow sitting there. So then we build our ends around our door end, which is just about 4 posts up and down. Put our door, install our door, and then we cover the 2 ends with plastic. Is the first plastic we put on, and we fasten that plastic that's on the end with wiggle wire track and wiggle wire. And that's the best thing that's manufactured since sliced bread that I know of for greenhouse and high tunnel operators. So both ends are going to have plastic on them now, and they're going to be fastened on with wiggle wire track. Then we're going to come in with 1 sheet of plastic that will cover this hole in top, sides, and top. So this one happens to have a 32-foot wide, 50-foot long piece of plastic on it. So we cut a 32 by 100, half in 2. We can use one of them on this one and one on the next one to make us a 18 by 48-foot house. And that's what this one is. It's 18 foot wide, 48 foot long. Then after we get it up on here, we fasten it down at both ends on those tracks, and then we start putting rope over the between every set of bows, there's going to be 2 ropes that go up and cross over in the middle and back down to the other side. And this is the strength of this house. We're using this plastic put on here, held tight with these ropes. That makes that plastic work as the same thing as a sheet iron does on a building for the strength wise. There again, I'm explaining to you that these ropes hold this plastic on this house, plus it also makes the strength of this house. Now, back when we used to just fasten this plastic down at the ground level on both sides, and this was all just loose hanging up over here, in a windy day, this would just flop, 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 pop, 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 and it'd be a continuous rain in here with the condensation that has risen up there and got on that plastic on the inside, and it just rained on you all day long. The plastic just pop, 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 and on these high winds, a lot of time it'd get 70, 80 mile an hour winds, and it would rip it right down through the middle. From the pop, 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 it'd rip it down the middle, and you'd lose it. So a friend of mine from over at Noble Research, Mr. Steve Upson, bless his heart, he got to go over to Israel. I didn't get to go with him. But he went over to Israel, and he found out that's what they were doing, was holding this plastic on with these ropes in between these bows. And so he came back and called me over. We sat down and talked about this, and he told me what they were doing over there. And so he asked me to put up one, and that's what I did. I first told him, Steve, it won't work. We got too high winds. Well, we put up one at his place first, and after 3 years, I had to confess to him that I was wrong, that it did work better with the ropes on it instead of just fastening at the bottom on each side. Even some of my fellow growers that wouldn't switch over with me to this rope way, now then, this last year, I know of some of them that is finally convinced to switch over and use the ropes instead of fastening it along the ground level, because they were losing plastic every 2 or 3 weeks, because last fall we had lots of high wind here in western and southern Oklahoma. What we've done now, we went outside and we've pulled this plastic up to show you how it's just laying behind these 2 ropes on each one of these bows. You can see it's laying in between them and the bow. And all I did is reach down there, it's laying down on the ground. We reached down there and got hold of that plastic and pulled it up there. And you can see how this vents it out, makes a lot more air come in here so when it gets warm. Because if you don't open one of these houses up, whether it's a high tunnel or a greenhouse, and get some ventilation in it, it's going to get hot in there pretty quick when the sun's shining bright. Now when we started to doing this is what we used, was a heavy baler twine for those big square bales. It's a heavy twine, and I will tell you, this one still got the baler twine on it, and it's 7 years old. So it lasts. There's nothing wrong with it. Some people were concerned about the baler twine. They wanted something a little smoother and said it might not eat on the plastic so, but like I say, this has been over 7 years and it's still the same plastic. Now we do take the plastic off in May. Take the sheet of plastic off the top in May, put a shade cloth on. That way we don't have all this heat to put up with during the hot summertime. It's a little cooler in here because of the shade cloth. But now what we've changed over to now on holding this rope on, we went to this they call Mule Tape. This is a Mule Tape. They pull electrical wire, telephone wire through these pipe they have laid underground. They got a way of blowing a cotton ball through there with a little string on it, and blow it a long ways, and then tie a rope onto it and pull the Mule Tape through, and then they tie their wire onto this and pull their wire through their pipe. So they'll figure this out pretty good, and then when they get through using that for a pull tape, then they roll it back up and we buy it to use on these houses to hold their plastic on. And so that's the way we do that. Now then, some of you are going to question me, what is wiggle wire and track? This is a track right here, just so you'll see, and we screw this on with screws on the top of our bow, and it's got a little track here, see? And then we take this, we put our plastic, pull it over the top of this, And then we'll just take this wire, and look here, and you just wiggle it in. That's the reason it's called wiggle wire. You just wiggle it right into the track just like it goes. Okay, and that's what holds your plastic on. You get ready to take that plastic off, all you have to do is just wiggle this wire back out and take your plastic off, and you're ready to put your shade cloth on there then, and put it back on, and then you put this back in on your shade, fasten it back on there, and there you go.
How do you get the plastic tight when you put it on to be stretch over that?
We pull it as we put it over there, over the top. We'll pull it as we work it in there at each end. It don't have to be real tight, because then when you start putting these ropes over them and pulling them down tight, that's what tightens your plastic up, is the fact that you're pulling it down between each bow a little bit, and that's the reason it hangs right there and never does flop. I don't care if it blows 80 miles an hour. Now, we've had several 80 mile an hours on these houses. I've had them running east and west. I've had them run, customers that have had them running east and west, that's had a lot of south wind on it, 80 mile an hour. Didn't hurt it a bit. I've had houses that's north and south that we've had heavy 80 mile an hour wind out of the west, and never lost one of those houses to that yet. We did lose a couple of 30-foot houses to a downdraft about 4 years ago, and that's the reason I kind of quit putting up 30-foot wide houses. About 26 wide is as wide as I want to go, and kind of stay in the limit to where this wind is getting rougher and rougher on us each year. Now, of course, the 120, 150 mile an hour wind may get these houses. I don't know. I've never had one go through a tornado yet to find out, and I hope I don't ever have to. And I've put up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these houses, and they're still standing.
What's the thickness of the plastic?
This plastic is a 6 mil poly. It's good for 4 years. The company will back it for 4 years from it becoming brittle or ripping. Now, they can tell if you've let a piece of plastic just flop and flop and flop and wear out. They can tell that versus just it getting brittle and ripping down the middle. But tell you the truth, I've never had to have a company back any of that plastic for 4 years. Like I say, this is 7 years old here on this house, but I take it off every summer and put it in the barn and put the shade cloth on. And because it's not on here during the hot summertime, that's what eats that plastic up, is the hot weather. Now, the plastic that you buy at a lumber yard, now that's altogether different plastic. You're lucky to get 3 to 6 months out of that before it tears up. So don't mistakenly go get that plastic from the lumber yard. It's real cheap, but you only get what you pay for.
Where can you find this on the market?
Well, you're going to have to either call someone like me or some greenhouse warehouse, or Google and see where you can buy greenhouse grade plastic. You want 6 mil, something that lasts for 4 years. And don't let them sell you something that's just a 1 year poly, because you'll be unhappy with that, I assure you. Now, a lot of people, I will tell you this, a lot of people try to make their little high tunnels out of PVC. That's good and fine if you was out of the wind. But that little 1-inch PVC is not made to stand up against the wind. When you put a piece of plastic over that, stretch it over that pipe, then it's got just like a wall there for that wind to hit, and they just won't hold up. If you're inside of a high tunnel, you want to put you up a little extra protection in there, because like I've told you in the previous videos, each layer you put over these plants is worth an extra 8 degrees. So therefore, you know, if I wanted to keep these in here from freezing and it was going to get down to say 20 degrees, one layer would keep it up to 28, but that's not good enough. So I'd come in here and put another layer over these buckets that would get it on down to 8 and 8, 16. Now then you'd be protected up, you know, up in the upper 30s, you'd be okay. But if it was going to get down to like 12 degrees, then that's where the PVC would be in good place. You could put this bucket here, and lay the first sheet of plastic over this bucket to keep it off your tomatoes, and then set you some of them little PVC pipe up over here, up a little higher, and put you another plastic over that, then you'd have 1, 2, 3 layers. 3/8 is 24, and you add that to the 12 that's going to get down to, you'd be up to 36 and not lose your tomatoes. So this is where that comes in. Some of that cheaper stuff, you know, the little 1/2-inch conduit or the PVC pipe, it's good to make them inside. I'm not going to talk bad about that, but please don't make them for the outside. They just won't stand up to the wind, and you'll get discouraged, get tired of gardening. And when you have a failure, it has a tendency to work on you to where you don't want to do it again. If you are enjoying these videos, then punch the like button, ring the bell, and subscribe, and we'll put some more of them on for you. Thank you.